Hello everyone, this is Dr. Jennifer Teal. Welcome back to my channel. This afternoon, I would like to do a brief introduction to ICD-10-PCS, which is the procedure coding system used in the inpatient healthcare setting. ICD stands for the International Classification of Diseases. This is the 10th revision, and it is the procedure coding system. So ICD-10-PCS. ICD-10-PCS is used only in the United States. And prior to October 1st of 2015, we were actually using ICD-9. We did not have a separate procedure coding system for inpatient coding at that point in time. The procedures were actually captured with volume 3 of the ICD-9 CM codebook. When we moved to ICD-10, we went with two separate classification systems, two separate code sets. ICD-10 CM, which is the diagnostic coding, and ICD-10 PCS, which is the procedure coding. ICD-10 PCS, or just PCS for short, is used to capture and bill for inpatient procedure services in the hospital environment. So when you're coding for a healthcare system, there are multiple bills that actually occur. You have the facility bill, so that's for the hospital itself, and then you have the professional bill, which captures the services of the doctors, the anesthesiologist, the surgeon, that sort of thing. So when we're talking about PCS, we're specifically talking about the facility bill in the inpatient environment. ICD-10-CM, just to give you a brief overview of the code sets, ICD-10-CM is used in all environments, and that's what captures the why something was done, what led to them needing an actual procedure performed, if you will. So ICD-10-CM is the diagnosis side. ICD-10-PCS is the procedure side, and that tells you what was done. So you have the why it was done and the what was done. And they're used together. So when you're actually coding and you're going to drop a bill, both of those are going to occur on the bill. We also have a code set called CPT, current procedural terminology, which is used to capture the outpatient procedures and services, or for when you're billing for the professional fees on the inpatient. So when you're somebody went to the OR, if it's an inpatient, that procedure will be coded with PCS for the hospital bill, the facility bill, but then it's going to also be coded using CPT so that the doctor can get paid directly. So two different bill types. And then you have HCPCS, which is mostly supplies and things like that, your durable medical equipment, your oxygen supplies and services, ambulances, things like that. So they all have a role, they all have a place. And as you progress in your career path and you're learning with coding, you're going to figure out which one is used for what purpose. With ICD-10 PCS specifically, let's talk about the code format and structure. ICD-10 PCS codes are always a full 7 characters long. And what I'm showing here on this slide is what each one of those characters represents. So the first character is going to be the section. The second character is the body system. The third character is the root operation. The fourth character is the body part. The fifth character is the operative approach. The sixth character is the device, and the seventh character is the qualifier. You must always have a full 7 characters, no more, no less. In addition, the letters I and O are not used in PCS coding so that they're not confused with the numbers 0 and 1. So no I's, no O's in PCS. Otherwise, they are alphanumeric. So you have your numbers 0 through 9, and then your letters A through Z, again, with the exception of I's and O's. So let's take a closer look. When we say all 7 characters, you can see here what each character represents, which I just went over. That section, body system, root operation, body part, operative approach, device, and qualifier. So you assign a character value for each one of these, and that value has a specific meaning. Let me turn on my laser pointer here, and you can see here. So our first character is section. So this value 0 equals the medical and surgical section. This character value L equals tendons. B is excision. 5 is lower arm and wrist. 0 is an open approach. Z, no device, and Z, no qualifier. So when we read a statement, so a case scenario or a procedure note from the medical record, you're going to have something like this: excision of the right lower arm and wrist tendon, open approach, is what is represented by this code down here. So the 0LB50ZZ. So you can see excision of right. So excision, root operation, lower arm and wrist tendon. So we're in the body system of the tendons, and we are lower arm and wrist. So 2 different characters that tell that story. And then it told us open approach. So that's how we determine open approach. And then there was no indication of a device or qualifier. So that's why these are ZZ. ZZ are what we consider placeholders, the Z, when there's no other value that's appropriate. Z means none. And so a lot of your codes are going to end in ZZ when there are no specific details that are provided in the tables for you to select from. So let's talk about each one of the characters separately and explain a little bit about what they are and what they represent. So character 1 is your section. PCS is divided into sections that identify the general type of procedure. And there are 17 sections within PCS, and each section begins with a different character value. The medical and surgical section is the first section in the code book, and all of the procedures performed from the medical and surgical section will start with the first character of 0. In the inpatient setting, most of the coding that you will perform is going to come from the medical surgical section. It is the largest section of the book and the one that is utilized most often. Following the medical and surgical section, we have the medical and surgical related sections. And you can see the first, the character value. So every code from each one of these sections will start with the same character value. So every code from obstetrics will start with a first character of 1. Every code from the placement section will start with a first character of 2. Every code from administration will start with the first character of 3, and so on. So med surg and then obstetrics, if you work in an environment that does OB, those are going to be your most common sections used. You can see, though, we have obstetrics, placement, administration, measurement and monitoring, extracorporeal assistance and performance, extracorporeal therapies, osteopathic, other procedures, chiropractic. These are what are considered the medical and surgical related sections. And then we have some additional ancillary sections: imaging, nuclear medicine, radiation oncology, physical rehab and diagnostic audiology, mental health, and substance abuse treatment. These type of procedures are generally not coded separately in the inpatient environment because the billing for those usually occurs from that department directly, and they're going to use CPT codes to capture those procedures and services. But always refer to your standard operating procedures for the facility that you work for to determine what all they will code. Because remember, we're talking about PCS is really all about that inpatient facility bill. So they're looking for what codes are going to impact that facility bill. Some do some additional coding because they want to capture data. They want their data to be rich. They want to be able to do research. They want to be able to know how many of a certain type of procedure was performed and so on. So they want to collect the data, whether it is used for reimbursement or not. So that may vary from facility to facility. So always follow the policies and procedures of the facility that you work for. Up next, we have our second character of the code, which is your body system. The body system provides information related to the general physiological system or anatomical region on which the procedure was performed. So some examples are going to be like your central nervous system, your peripheral nervous system, the heart and great vessels, upper arteries, lower arteries, your eye, ears, nose, your respiratory system, muscles, tendons, that sort of thing. So those are just a few examples of what to be looking for in terms of a body system. Character 3 is root operation. Root operations really are the backbone of PCS. It's one of the most important characters in the PCS code because the root operation identifies the objective of the procedure, and it's usually what you're going to use to look up your procedures in the Alphabetic Index. It's usually going to be your starting place when you're in that index. I will record a separate video on root operations specifically because those really do warrant some more attention, and I'd like to go into those in detail. So I will do a separate video on those. So feel free to hit the subscribe button so you can get some alerts and notifications on when I do publish some new videos. Hit the like button, and please feel free to follow me because I will do some more in-depth videos on some of these things. So just to give you a sense of the medical and surgical section, because that is the largest section, there are 31 different root operations, and every root operation has a precise definition that must be applied. And the full definition must be applicable to the procedure that was performed in order for you to use that particular root operation. So you have things like alteration, bypass, change, control, creation, destruction, detachment, dilation, division, so on. These all have specific meanings within PCS. And one caveat is that your clinical staff are not going to be using the same terminology that PCS uses. So you really have to be able to understand the terminology used in PCS and to be able to translate between what's in the health record and what that means in terms of PCS terminology. So having a good understanding is going to be very important. Our fourth character represents the specific body part. So we talked about body system earlier. Now we're talking about body part. And the body part is the specific anatomical site on which the procedure was performed. So we had a general body system, and now we're talking about the specific body part. Up next, we have our operative approaches, and this is another thing that is unique to PCS, so you really need to understand these definitions. This is the approach or the method or technique that is used to reach the procedure site. So when they performed the procedure, was it an open approach, which means they cut through the skin or mucous membrane to any other body layers necessary to actually expose the site of the procedure? So they opened them up to get to what they needed to reach to perform their procedure. Percutaneous, on the other hand, is just a puncture or minor incision through the skin or mucous membrane and any other body layers necessary to reach the site of the procedure. Then we have percutaneous endoscopic, similar to percutaneous, except that they are also using instruments to visualize the site of the procedure. Via natural or artificial opening. So that you can think of things like through the nose, through the mouth. Those are some natural openings. Artificial openings would be like your ostomies. That would be an artificial opening. So it's entry of instrumentation through a natural or artificial external opening to reach the site of the procedure. Next, we have natural or artificial opening endoscopic. So similar to the natural or artificial opening, but now they're using instrumentation to visualize the site of the procedure. So the endoscopic type of root operations, think about your oscopies, things that end in oscopy. That is usually a good indication that they used that instrumentation to visualize the site of a procedure, like a bronchoscopy, a colonoscopy, an esophagoscopy. Anything oscopy is a good indication. Now that doesn't mean it's restricted to just that terminology, but it gives you a good clue. Next, we have natural or artificial opening with percutaneous endoscopic assistance. And finally, external approach. All of these definitions are listed in your ICD-10-PCS code book. So make sure that you take some time to read through them and really get to know them. Depending on what publisher version of a code book you have, some of them offer pictures that give you a good visual representation of how these are achieved. So it gives you a picture of what open would look like. And so if you're a visual learner, that can be very helpful. But getting down these root operations is probably the second most important thing after the root operations, because the root operation says what was done. And this is kind of how they achieved it. How did they get to the site to perform the procedure? So it's the access location, the method, and the type of instrumentation used to accomplish the procedure. Our sixth character is a device. So the device is assigned only when the device remains in the patient's body at the conclusion of the procedure. So think of things like stents and pacemakers and cardiac leads and that sort of thing. It could be a biological or a synthetic material that takes the place of all or of a portion of a body part, such as a skin graft or a joint prosthesis. It could be a biological or synthetic material that assists or prevents a physiological function. So like an IUD or an IUD is a good example of that one. Could be a therapeutic material that is not absorbed by, eliminated by, or incorporated into a body part. So think about a radioactive implant. It's an implant. It remains after the conclusion of the procedure. Could also be mechanical or electronic appliances that are used to assist or monitor, take the place of, prevent a physiological function. So this is where your orthopedic pins, your pacemaker, that sort of thing. So device must remain after the conclusion. We're not talking about temporary drains or wound packing, that sort of thing. And finally, we have our seventh character, which is a qualifier. And a qualifier is just something that would provide additional information about the procedure. So for example, it might indicate the destination of a bypass procedure. It might indicate whether a joint replacement device was cemented or uncemented. When we're talking about some procedures like your drainage or excision or extraction, you might have the qualifier of diagnostic to indicate that that procedure was a biopsy. So it's additional detail. And not every procedure type is going to have a qualifier. You'll end up with a Z for no qualifier. Remember that placeholder that we told you about? Because you do need the full 7 characters. So you'll see a Z for no qualifier in a lot of cases. So those are the 7 characters that comprise an ICD-10-PCS code. So now let's talk a little bit about the code book. I did do a separate video on using your code book, just a little introduction to the code book where we actually flipped through the pages and looked at some of these things. But just to give you an idea, if you're watching this video separately, your 2 main portions of the book are going to be your alphabetic index and your tables. That's where you're going to be working most of the time when you're using your code book. You're going to use your root operations as your main terms. You're going to further define it by a subterm that will direct you to the appropriate table to use. And then you go to the table to actually what we call build your PCS code. So you're going to build it by assigning character values to all 7 characters. Now, depending on what publisher version of a code book you have, the appendices vary in terms of how many different appendices that publisher offers. Most of the time, what you're going to see is most definitely your operative approach definitions, your root operation definitions, your body part keys, your body part definition, and device definitions, and some other things. So always take the time to get a feel for your code book, review it to see what's in the back of the book, how many appendices you have and what they represent. That is a great resource for you and will really help you in your coding process. Understanding the terminology used by PCS is critical. So make use of the resources that are available to you there in your code book. So let's talk about the index. The index is always going to give you at a minimum the first 3 characters of your code, because it's those first 3 characters that you need in order to get to the appropriate table. Sometimes they will give you more than 3. It could be 4, 5, 6, or even 7 characters. But you always have to go to the table to obtain your complete code and to verify it. Now, your main terms are typically going to be your root operation, so bypass, excision, transplantation, division, things like that. Common procedure names could also be used, like an appendectomy, a cholecystectomy, or a general type of a procedure. They don't use eponyms, so your common procedure names and your root operations are going to be most often what you're using. Here's just a little snippet of what the alphabetic index looks like, starting from the letter A. So it is in alphabetic order. You have your main terms that are bold and are always flush to the left. And when you look up certain things, as you'll notice here, you see that sometimes you get more than 3 characters. So in this case, we have a 0UT9. That 0UT is what I need to find the correct table. And then 9, it's already giving me my 4th character value. So when I get to the tables, I would complete my code by choosing the 5th character, 6th character, and 7th character. In some cases, it gives you a cross-reference and it tells you to see something else. See alteration abdominal wall. So what this is telling you is that this term, abdominoplasty, doesn't really provide enough detail to know specifically what root operation was performed. So it's giving you some alternatives here. So you're going to go look over here, go look over here, go look over here. You're going to read the definition of alteration, read the definition of repair, read the definition of supplement. Compare those to your particular case scenario to figure out, okay, they did an abdominoplasty, but was it an alteration? Was it a repair? Was it a supplement? And depending on how you narrow it down, here's the 4 character values it's going to give you to go over to that table and finish building your code. So again, we still have 4. But if you come down here, you'll see in some cases, we end up with a full 7 characters. So that's why using the index is helpful. You can go directly to the tables if you know how to use them. I would never recommend that in the medical and surgical section because it is simply so large. But when you get to a smaller section like obstetrics, that's only a couple pages long, it might be easier just to go directly to the tables. And the official guidelines allow you to do that. So here's just a snapshot One helpful hint when you're in the index, pay attention to, again, the bold is your main terms. Then you have this gray bar that runs down as a visual to help you quickly identify the different subterms. So that first indent is your subterms, and they will be alphabetical. So you can just follow down. In some of the terms, you might have a page and a half of subterms. So that gray bar really is a great visual to help you quickly jump from subterm to subterm to subterm without looking at each individual one. Now the code tables, they will have the first 3 characters always up at the top in the top left-hand corner of the table. And then each table is going to have 4 columns and 1 or more rows. So the column is the character values. So you're going to have character 4, 5, 6, and 7 represented by the columns. And then the rows are your various combinations of values that you can use to build your code. So let's take a closer look at that. Here's just an example of a table, and you can see up here in the top left are my first 3 characters. This is a great way to double check your work. It tells me that I am in the medical and surgical section, so my first character is going to be a 0. I'm in the body system of upper joints, and my root operation is removal. One thing that's nice is that it doesn't just give you the term removal, but it tells you the definition. So you don't have to stop and go look that up. You can say, okay, removal is taking out or off a device from a body part. So I can look at my case scenario and go, does this definition fit? Did they really take a device off of a body part? And then that's a way of double checking your work. So always a great tip there to check the definition up at the top of the table. So here we have our columns: body part, approach, device, and qualifier. And then we have the rows. So this box that I put around this middle row, one thing that I want to communicate here is that when you're building your code, your character values for the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th character must all come from the same row of the table. Always from the same row. So if I was trying to do a code and I said 0 RP for my first 3 characters, and then I wanted to say that it was the elbow joint right, and then I wanted, so that's in my second row. But then I wanted to say open approach, and I wanted to do an internal fixation device, which is a character 4. Well, something's not right because I can't go from here to here. This one also has internal fixation device, so that would be okay because it's in the same row. But sometimes you have to tell, so like elbow joint is in both of these rows, for example. See? L, elbow joint right, L, elbow joint right. It's in this row, it's in this row. So what is the difference? The difference, one difference is the operative approach. So if my approach was external, then that helps me eliminate this second row because there's no external option here. So that would be a way for me to know that I need to be working in this bottom row because I know for sure that my approach was external. So you see, it eliminated some of the device choices. I still have a drainage device, an infusion device, an internal fixation device, and an external fixation device, but I no longer have this autologous tissue substitute as a choice, a spacer as a choice, a synthetic substitute as a choice, or non-autologous tissue substitute. So if I'm trying to select external as my operative approach, but I know that it was a spacer that was used, well, then somewhere I've made an error because that's not a valid code. External and spacer are not in the same row. So one of those is not correct. So I need to go back to my case scenario and figure out, maybe I have my operative approach wrong. Maybe it's not really an external approach. So always build your code from the same row of the table. And like I said, there are times when you have the same body part in multiple rows, just like this. So you have to process of elimination to figure out which row I should be working from. Another tip is that sometimes your table will continue on to the next page. So always make sure you're checking that, because you might be limiting yourself to what you see on this page, when in reality, this table continues on to the next page. And depending on what version of the code book, there will be some kind of an indicator that says that the table continues. It just varies from book to book, but that is definitely something to be aware of. So that's just a closer look at the code tables. Some references and resources that I used for this presentation: the ICD-10-PCS reference manual, the official guidelines for coding and reporting. Those guidelines are found, you can find them online in like a PDF version if you simply do an internet search, Bing or Google or whatever internet browser you choose to use, whichever search engine you want to use, but also in your actual code book. And again, depending on what publisher version, they're either going to be listed in one of the appendices, but most often they're right up front in your code book. Those are your rules to the road. You must follow them at all times. So it is definitely worthwhile to take a good look at your official guidelines for coding and reporting. So you can see the rest of my resources here on the screen. And with that, I am going to go ahead and close it for the day. Again, I would appreciate if you give this video a like. If you choose to subscribe to my channel, much appreciated. But with that, Dr. Teal out, and I look forward to speaking with you the next time around.